All right, cool. So JavaScript, what is JavaScript? JavaScript is the engine of the web. It is what gives our websites and our applications power. It gives them the ability to be extensible and the ability to interact with our users and make changes and gather data and have persistence and really everything that isn't just something you are looking at that's like a static piece of information is powered by JavaScript. So this is going to be the bulk of what we are learning about throughout the class. It has probably the most complexity and it is the most exciting and the most fun to use, along with being the most frustrating. So hope you guys stick with it. I hope you enjoy it. And we're going to try to go through this as step-by-step as possible and also not go too slow that it's so boring. So we're going to be doing some examples and working together most of the day today. All right. So how does JavaScript relate to the ecosystem of our applications that we've been building so far? So far we have our HTML file, right? And our HTML file we know is kind of the bones of our application. It's the structure of everything. And when we load up our web page, when we load up an HTML page in the browser, we see our tags, we see the content that we put inside of our HTML displayed on the page. And then along with that, we also are able to have a separate file that's our CSS, and we're able to point our HTML to our CSS with the link tag. And that is going to be able to style those tags and give them color and give them animations and things like that. So we can do a lot with HTML and CSS and those two paired together. Now, JavaScript, like I said, is the engine. What gives our applications logic and the power to do lots of things. So how we connect that into our HTML is actually very similar to how we connect our CSS. So we're going to be using a tag to add our JavaScript file, or basically connect our JavaScript file to our HTML. And this little example is we have the bones, we have HTML, the bones, and we have CSS, the skin, how cool it looks. And then JavaScript is like the Death Star Kyber death ray that does all the awesome, cool stuff like blowing up Alderaan. And here's another little diagram just kind of showing that same thing we just talked about with less Star Wars involved. Structure, styling, functionality. I just ripped this off the internet. I did not draw that. Okay, so question, do websites need JavaScript? You may be thinking, okay, cool. So we have been building some little websites. We did our joke website. We have added a lot of what seems like functionality. We're able to make things animate. We're able to make things spin. Sam's website has a ton going on. He's got things bouncing all over the place. He's got Doge memes. He's got a lot of action happening. And it seems like that is, that's cool. That's a website. That's action. That's functionality. But really, it's still a static website when we think about that. And when we think about a static website versus a dynamic website, the difference between those two is being powered by JavaScript. And what that looks like at the end of the day is kind of like Buzz Lightyear's arm sticker. So he has a sticker on his arm with a bunch of buttons and gauges and stuff, but they don't really do anything. You look at those and, Buzz Lightyear's gauge is always going to be maxed out right there because it's a sticker. It's printed on. It's never, ever going to change. It looks cool, and you could make that look as cool as you want, but it's always going to look exactly the same. Versus a Pip-Boy, which is from Fallout, which is basically like a personal computer on your arm, and you can switch through and you can toggle through your inventory. And as you pick up a new weapon, it's going to be displayed in your inventory, and things are constantly changing and evolving because it is dynamic and it's powered by a program. It's a Fallout world. I have no idea. Let's say it's JavaScript. So JavaScript gives our applications power. It gives them the ability to change, the ability to be updated whenever you're on Twitter and you see a new tweet pop in at the top. That's dynamic activity. Those are things changing in real time, and that's always powered with JavaScript. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight into the value of JavaScript, and we're going to see it pretty soon here as we keep going. But so far with the sites we've been building, learning HTML and CSS, they did not have any of this dynamic quality. Okay, so are you cut out to be a programmer? I know a lot of people have a preconceived notion about what it means to be a programmer, what it means to be an engineer, in heavy air quotes, what a developer is. And personally myself, I had a lot of reservations about getting into software development as well, because my background is more artistic. I've always sucked at math. I would just never thought of myself as like a techie nerdy. Well, I am a nerd, but like a super sciencey person. And I didn't think that it would be something I could succeed at, because I thought it really only catered to those types of people. But programming is not about being good at math or being very right-brained. It's about learning a new way of thinking. It's about taking problems and being able to break them down into unique little pieces that you can then solve with a tool belt that you're developing over time of syntax and ideas and things you can use with JavaScript and whatnot, and any programming language. It really isn't specific to JavaScript. So I just wanted to share that programming is not about memorization. You're not memorizing syntax. You're not trying to, just cram your brain through all of these things with all these things for some test that's coming up. It's about kind of retraining yourself to think about problems in a new way. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to see a lot of syntax that we don't know, that we don't understand, that we're not going to learn for a while. There's a lot of unknowns as we get started with JavaScript, but I want you guys to realize that we're trying to train ourselves how to think. We're learning a new language here, and it's going to take time, but don't worry about memorizing things right now. The focus right now is about, how can I kind of build a good mental model of what it looks like to be a programmer? That's something to keep in the back of your mind. Obviously, things will get memorized as time goes on. There will be syntaxes that you use often that are going to pop up, and you just naturally remember those. So I don't want you guys to have, this isn't like a flashcards to memorize every single HTML tag or trying to remember every single method you could call on a string or whatever. This is just a way of thinking. And you can do it, absolutely. Like, you are cut out to be a programmer without a doubt. I struggled a lot when I was learning. This wasn't something that came super naturally to me. It was, like, I was definitely towards the bottom of my class when I was in Galvanize in a coding boot camp. And I think that, some people are going to struggle more than others. A lot of these concepts just come more naturally to folks. So no matter how much you're struggling, no matter how much you feel like this isn't, something you can do, that is just not true. And that's one of the reasons I want to do this together with everybody here, because everyone else is going to be feeling almost the exact same way. They're just, everybody's putting on their own front. So just want you guys to know that whenever you feel like you're struggling, you feel like you can't handle this, you can. And everyone else is feeling the exact same way that you guys are. And the web is an exciting place. If you've ever thought, oh, I wish there was an app that did this, or like, that'd be cool if there was a game that you could do this in, or, any idea that you had for something that could live on the web or some kind of program or application. When we learn these tools, you are building a skill set to be able to do anything you want, like any single idea you have, like an art installation, some kind of data processing, like data visualization, anything you want to do, any idea you have could be done with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So these three building blocks are tools for you to do anything creative or scientific or literally anything. So the possibilities are endless, and it's really cool to see what we can do with JavaScript. And we're hopefully going to be using GitHub to be able to look at each other's projects and kind of see what other people are doing and work together in an open source kind of model. So that should be really fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Okay, so we are going to jump pretty quickly into just doing some hands-on lessons here. Oh, nope, we're not on homework yet. Oh, goodness, go back. Okay, so we're going to jump into some following along stuff for the majority of the class today, because that's really just the best way and the only way to do this. So I slacked out this repository, javascript-first-steps, under the dev delta space. And what we're going to have everybody do is pull this repo down onto their own machines. For everyone who followed through with the Git and GitHub homework, you should be able to pretty easily click this code button here, and then we can go ahead and copy that down, probably using HTTPS. And you can run that git clone command to get that into any folder or directory that you want on your own machine. And those bullet points are laid out here for the steps you need to take to get this set up. For anybody who didn't go through the Git and GitHub homework, and it seems a little too daunting and you don't want to worry about this right now, you can download a zip file of this directory. and then you can open that folder on your computer, and you just need to be able to navigate to it using the terminal, and get into the folder, and we'll be able to open that with VS Code. So I think, let's see. So Eric, this is a little new, but Eric, you're familiar with Git and GitHub, correct?
Yeah, I got it. I got it cloned down and all set up already. So.
All right, sweet. Very cool. Sean, Sam, Jens, are you guys looking good on that front? I just want to make sure we're not leaving anybody behind.
I'm getting it right now, bro.
Oh gosh, it's just Slacker. Okay. Shannon, I'm sure you're good to go. If you want to follow along or not, totally up to you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Sweet. Joseph, I know you got this stuff figured out. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Okay, so once we get that pulled down, we want to CD into the repository, into the directory that you first pulled down. And we're not actually going to have anything here yet, so hold on one second. And what we're going to do, sorry, I have multiple directories open over here, but really the only one that we're looking at here is this javascript-first-steps. So from your command line, go ahead and type code space dot to open up the directory javascript-first-steps in VS Code. Make sure if you're not in it yet, you need to go ahead and type cd space into javascript-first-steps, and then type code dot to be able to open it up, and you should be able to get this up in VS Code. But okay, so as soon as everybody gets this directory open here, this javascript-first-steps, you're only going to have the README file in there. So you're going to have the README file, which is the same thing that we're seeing here displayed. And you can keep this open as a reference because we'll copy and paste some HTML in. But what we want to do is inside of javascript-first-steps, go ahead and create a directory. We can do this through the terminal with the mkdir with make dir. Or you can do it in VS Code itself. So you could do new folder, and then, your name, just your first name probably, and you don't need to put an extension on that because we're just making a directory here. And then you'll right click on the directory as well and click new file. And then in that new file, we're going to make an index.html. And we're also going to make another file called app.js. app.js. And the reason we're naming these things index and app is really just a standard. It's just something that across the board people have kind of decided is what we call our base HTML file and your primary JavaScript file. There's different names people use depending on what kind of application you're working in, but for now we're just going to do index.html and app.js. And if you're in the console, or sorry, if you're in the terminal, you can do make dir for your name directory, and then you can cd into that directory. And then you'll use the touch command. So you can do touch space app.js. And then once that runs, you can do touch space index.html. So either way will work. Basically, you just want to get to this point so that you have a directory that is your name that has your stuff in there. And then also in the spirit of making this something that we can kind of turn in homework-wise, we are going to use Git as well to create a branch off of this. So what we'll do, once everybody gets to this point and they have their name and the app.js and the index.html set up, we're going to go ahead and open the terminal. And you guys are already there, but I'm going to cd into delta public. JavaScript-first-steps. Okay, and then once you guys have those built, from your terminal, you're going to want to create a new branch. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to type, git checkout -b, and then it would be Collins work or Collins JavaScript or just your name. Doesn't really matter. We're going to be creating a new branch off of the main branch. And if you've forgotten some of this GitHub stuff, don't worry about it too much. We're going to be doing this on the reg. So This is going to get drilled into our brains over time. But basically what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, I want to create a new branch, a new alternate universe of this code here so that I can do my work. So that when you're done, you can push your work up to your branch. And then we're going to do some pull requests from everybody back into the main repository. So that way we can make comments and we can look at those pull requests and we can have conversation on GitHub about the code everybody's writing today. So you're going to type git checkout -b. I'm just going to call this test. And then when you do that, depending on how you have your terminal set up, you might see this git branch change. If not, it might not output right there, but you can actually see it by typing git branch, and then you'll be able to see the probably just 2 branches you'll see there, the main and then the one that you just created. So now at this point, we can safely make any of the changes that we want, and you'll be able to push these up to your own branch at the end of the day. And then we'll get some merge requests going, pull requests going. So that'll be fun. All right. Let me know. Let's see. Everybody, give me a thumbs up on the video if you guys get to this point, or if you have any trouble with Git or anything, or if you're still waiting, or if you're still working.
What does git branch do? Do we need to type that after? Or
sorry, no. Git branch is basically just going to tell you what branches there are. So
okay.
Git branch with no operands just tells you how many branches there are. Ooh, yeah, look at that little thumbs up emojis. That's great. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Basically, the TLDR version is just downloading Homebrew, and then going to the Git website and copying and pasting in basically the Homebrew command, the brew command to install Git on your machine.
Okay, sick.
So once you get those two steps completed, maybe we can jump back over and see if everything's good. I think that's all you should need to be able to do this.
Okay.
But yeah, you're going to need that, and then you can run that git clone command, and that instruction is here as well.
Sweet.
I'll send this to you again in case that got lost somewhere. So follow instructions to git clone. And just Slack me. You can just message me directly if you have any issues with that.
Cool. Right on. Thanks,
But
Michael.
hopefully we can get you caught up so we're not leaving you in the dust here. Sorry about that. Okay. Cool.
You can always do the work and check it into a new branch later.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good point, Joseph. So Eric, if you want to, you could just create a new folder anywhere on your computer, and just go ahead and follow the same commands we're doing.
Okay, that works.
Do
I
you have
cloned down everything. I have the index file and the source file directed to my JS file and everything. So.
Oh, okay. So you're basically at this point here where we have the directory.
Yeah.
JS index.html. Yeah, Joseph, you're totally right.
I just don't have like the branch and stuff all set up.
Perfect. Yeah, no worries, man. That's great. Let's just do this. Let's just roll with the folder that you have already, and then after class, you and I can just make sure we have your Git stuff set up so we can get that homework. We can just get it turned into GitHub or checked into GitHub. So right perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. That's a good point. Okay. Cool. So we got our little template set up. Perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is, if you guys want to go back over to the browser really quick, and for the sake of time, so that we can really get our feet wet with JavaScript rather than worrying too much about HTML, let's take this little example chunk of HTML here that starts with the doc type, and we're just going to copy this. So this is everything we've gone over in the past, just a very, very simple basic HTML file that has all of the necessary pieces to get us up and running, and then potentially connect it to our JavaScript. So go ahead and copy this code example from the javascript-first-steps README. And we're going to go back over to VSCode, and in that app.js file, or sorry, in the index.html that we created, go ahead and just paste that in there. So, like we had talked about in that one slide where we talked about how JavaScript is connected to our HTML. It communicates with our HTML similarly to how our CSS file does. We're gonna do that right now. We're actually gonna make that connection. So if we look here at this commented out piece of code, and this is the syntax for HTML that's commented out, that basically just is visually there, but it's not being It's treated as if it's not there by the browser. So when we look at this, we see an example of a link tag. We're not worrying about CSS today, so there is no link tag. There is no main.css since you didn't create that file. But we have the link, we have the href, and then we say, okay, where's the href? Where's that hypertext reference pointing to? And then the file name, and then the relationship is a style sheet. So similar to how we use a link tag to connect CSS, we are going to use something called a script tag or a script element to join our JavaScript to our HTML, to connect those two together. So very similar, you're going to notice that instead of an href here, we are using an src attribute. So the source attribute, and if you write this out, and remember you can do script and you can hit tab, and VSCode will automatically turn that into an opening and closing tag for your element. And then if you add that src attribute, even with just an empty string really quick, you can hover over it and it'll tell you a little bit. This attribute specifies the URI of an external script. You can use an alternative to embedding a script directly within a document. Cool, awesome. And we'll notice one other little difference between the link tag. So the link tag is a self-closing tag. This is self-contained. It doesn't have the closing, link with the slash in it. The reason being is because a script tag can actually contain content. So the script tag here, sorry, just to avoid confusion, I'm going to delete that one. So the script tag here, you could actually write JavaScript in here. So this is something you can do. Once again, we want to keep the concept of separation of concerns in mind. So we want to keep our JavaScript separated from our HTML. So we're not going to be doing this. You'll see this a lot in different frameworks like React and Angular. There's a lot of code where you're going to have your HTML and your JavaScript and your CSS even in the same file. But today, for what we're learning, we are going to stick with external resources because it keeps our separation of concerns nice and clean. So the last piece we need to add here to our script tag is the replacing this text here. This is link up to your JS file. So if we're linking to our JavaScript file, similar to the way we link to a CSS file, it's really pretty much going to be the same thing as like the href attribute. So to link with the source, we're just going to say, okay, where is the the file structure? How do we point our HTML to our app.js file? And it happens to be in the exact same directory here at the same level. When we talk about at the same level, that means these guys are kind of like siblings, basically. So as in app.js is not in its own folder. It's not like this goes into scripts, and then you got to go into scripts to actually access app.js. So since it's right here, we can just say app.js. If this was in a folder called scripts, we would have to say scripts/app.js, just to kind of indicate the directory structure. But because it's right here, we can just say app.js right there. So at this point, it seems logical that our JavaScript is connected to our HTML. We don't really know yet. So let's go over to our app.js file. I'm gonna close up these guys. And in here, we're going to write our first line of JavaScript. This one, we're not going to talk too much about all the details of this, but I just want you guys to type alert, and then you're going to type open parentheses and then close parentheses in your app.js file. Go ahead and throw a little semicolon at the end of that. We're going to talk about all of the syntax in just a second. Once you have that written, go ahead and write open quote and then close quote inside of those parentheses. And then in the quotes, write anything you want. So does this work? Hoping so. Okay. So inside the quotes, inside of the parentheses, inside of to the right of the word alert, and then with a semicolon at the end of it. So go ahead and get that written in there. Oh, Colin, your cat is going nuts on your face. And then one other thing that's really important here, everybody who's working in VS Code, really any IDE or text editor, some text editors by default have something set up where you auto save. So whenever you navigate away from a file, it will save your changes. So for example, this one, when I hit enter here and I make a change, you see this little dot, like the X turns into a dot. That means that we have unsaved changes in this file. So for mine, when I click over here and I blur the focus of where I'm looking, so I'm no longer looking at the app.js, it automatically saves it on change. Not everybody's are set up that way. So sometimes when you're moving away from the window or toggling back and forth, this isn't going to save by default. So you're gonna have to Command S, or even if you wanted to, you can hit File Save. and then that will save the changes in here. So Command S is much faster, and even faster as we can change our settings later on, where we can just have this change on blur. So make sure to save your files. Sean and I dug through a huge problem last week where we had a Git issue because we weren't even saving the files correctly. So make sure to save them. And then once you're at this point, we are going to go back to our terminal, and we're going to use the terminal to basically open up our index.html so we can do this programming kind of live. So what we're going to do is we're going to type the command open, and open is basically like double clicking on a file in the file explorer. So when you double click on a file, your computer says, okay, this is the extension .txt, so I'm going to kind of figure out the default application that should open this, and it's probably Notepad or Notes or something like that. If it's a .html, the extension HTML by default opens up in a browser. And if your default browser is set to Google Chrome, which, another note, if it is not Google Chrome, make sure that it is, because that's going to be necessary for some debugging. You can use Chrome, or I guess you could use, I use Brave, which is built on top of Chrome. That's what Martin uses as well. But if you're in Safari or Firefox, things are going to look a little different for you. So if you can use Chrome, that'd be great. Just if it's set as your default browser, this command will automatically use it. So we're going to type open. And then what we want to open is our index.html. Because remember, if we typed open app.js or open our CSS file, that is not what the browser initially communicates with, right? So when we say, okay, browser, like the browser is requesting a resource and it's going out to get information, it's picking up HTML files. The browser is served HTML files only. And then the HTML file is kind of gives a map saying, all right, here's your CSS, here's your JavaScript, and then it pulls those in for the browser to use. So let's type this. Oh my God. Oh, whoops, sorry. I was not in the right directory. So make sure you're in the your name directory in your terminal. And then we're gonna run that again. All that build up and it didn't even work. Okay, here we go. So when you open up your page, you should hopefully see something like this. You should see an alert. Sean, is that good? All right, sweet. Eric, is everything going all right for you?
Yeah, except for I'm not seeing this alert modal.
Okay, and yeah, I definitely want to make if it doesn't take too much time, we'll try to get everybody on the same page here, because this is where it gets this is where the fun begins, as Anakin says. So, Jens, are you good? Did you get that set up? Are you getting to the alert?
Yes, I'm good. The problem was I just updated my laptop yesterday and Xcode was deleted, so I just had to reinstall that.
Oh man, that does not go very quickly either. Installing Xcode. Good work.
Yeah, it's good now. I just have to set up everything now.
Okay, awesome. Sam, is this working okay for you? Did you run into any blockers on this?
No, works great.
Awesome, cool. Okay, Eric, what are you seeing here? So did you, first of all, let's just make sure we have our structure set up correctly for you. So did you create a directory inside of, or sorry, a new folder, a new directory inside of this JavaScript-first-steps folder?
I did, yeah.
Or sorry, I guess you're just working with one from scratch, right?
Right. So we'll have JavaScript-first-steps, then I have my name, and then I have my app.js file and my index.html file. I have it, the source linked to my, wait, you know what? I think I found it.
What was it, out of curiosity?
I think I forgot a closing tag on my script.
Aha, awesome. That's great. Okay. Yeah, that can be tricky, because yeah, like we talked about, the link tag is self-closing. So when you're connecting CSS, you don't have that closing tag, but when you're working with the script tag, you do have that closing tag. So kind of tricky to remember which ones are which. Did it pop up for you?
Yeah, it popped up. I must have deleted that greater than caret.
Oh yeah, no worries. Perfect. Awesome. Very cool. Glad we got that figured out. Okay. Joseph, everything going all right for you?
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Yeah. Feel free to just chime in, just interrupt me as soon as something's not working for you guys, because I just this will be fun if we can all kind of work through this together. So perfect. Now that we're all back on the same page, if we go over to our browser, we're going to be able to see a modal pop up and it says this, or well, it's an alert, not a modal. It says this page says whatever you typed in there. Does this work? Hoping so. And you're gonna be able to clear it out and type okay. Hold on, I gotta close the door. My dogs are going completely nuts behind me. Okay. Cool. And then now, when we close the modal, there's just nothing. There's absolutely nothing, just a white void of nothingness. And the reason is because we haven't added any content to our HTML file, right? So that is expected because there's nothing inside of our body tag. Remember, everything in the body is what actually gets sent to the browser to be rendered. Anything inside of the head tag is information for the browser that doesn't have to do with being rendered to the page itself. So we are not actually going to spit anything out onto the page today. We're just going to be focusing on JavaScript and some logic, and we're going to learn where we can kind of look at the output of our JavaScript code that's not being displayed to a user on the page. And that's going to be coming up right now, according to my notes. 1 second. So let's write another line of code in our app.js. And yes, I know that none of this makes any sense yet. We are going over it. Don't fret. So we're going to type the word console. You're going to type console dot, as in period, console.log, and then we're going to do open and close parentheses again. Go ahead and put a semicolon at the end of it. And then inside of those two parentheses characters, you can do an open and close quote again, very similar to alert. And type something else, type something different. So, hey, this is a console.log statement. Okay. So once you have this built, and this is like I said, this is very similar to the alert syntax. So you're gonna have that the open parentheses, quote, something, close quote, close parentheses, and then the semicolon. So once you have something written in your console log statement here, and it doesn't have to be on line 3. You could also have it on line 2. It's sometimes nice to put an extra space between your different lines of JavaScript just for readability. So I'm going to be doing that as we go along, but that doesn't really matter that much. Command save our file. Now we're going to go back over here and we're going to refresh our page again. So the reason that refreshing our page is important when we're writing new code and new JavaScript and even HTML is because the version of this index.html that the browser is serving up to us to see on our page right now is actually stale at this point in time because we made a quick change to our file and we saved it. But the browser, the last thing that the browser loaded up was before we saved the file. So it's important to refresh our browser page when we were making changes because those won't be displayed until it fetches that newest, freshest version of our code. So when we hit refresh, it's going to go and request our HTML file, and then our HTML file reaches out to our app.js, and we see some JavaScript pop up. We see our alert again because that's the first line of our code. We click OK. Very cool. And nothing else happens, right? So how do we see what we just did, that console.log statement? What we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys right click, or you can also do command, option click. I guess it's control click on Mac. So control click or right click, and then you're going to click on inspect. So when we click inspect, you should see something pop up down here, a little drawer that's going to slide open. It might be on the right hand side or the left hand side. It could look like this, could look like this, or it could look like this. This is going, if you hit those 3 dots, that will allow you to change the orientation of where that drawer slides up from. So mine came up from the bottom, and I think I should be able to bump up the size of this actually, so we can, that's for Colin. There you go, old man. Okay, so when you open this up, go ahead and you might actually, spoiler alert, you might actually see something here, but go ahead and click on the console tab. So these are little tabs here. They don't make it super clear these are tabs, but these are kind of like tabs in a browser as well. So there's different pieces of information that are in here. There's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. I know that this is overwhelming when you first open up the developer tools, and that's what these are called, is the developer tools. Oh, shut up, Sean. I saw that. So the dev tools, developer tools, is where we're going to be spending a lot of time as JavaScript developers. This is where we are able to debug our code and see outputs from things that aren't displayed to the browser, check values. There's a lot of power. The developer tools and what Chrome and Google has given us here is awesome. And this is really, really something that you really can't develop JavaScript without it. It's really crucial to what we're doing. So we're going to introduce it right off the bat here. And if we click on this console tab, you probably recognize that, you know, what we wrote was console.log. And actually, you know, for the sake of readability, do you guys like this better if I have this split like this? Okay. So let's do that. Let's split it up like so. Okay. So, oh man, that text is really small. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so we see our console.log statement show up, and it's definitely not a coincidence that we have the word console in our command here, and that we see it in the console tab. Those are obviously related to each other. We're going to go into it a little bit more as to why that is, but what we just did here is two ways of basically checking our interaction between our JavaScript file and our browser. Generally, when you very first write a new JavaScript file, when you create a new JavaScript file and you have a new index.html file and you're connecting them together, generally the first thing you do is you just write a console.log statement to say like, you know, blah, 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 this is wired up, cool. And then you check your browser, refresh your page. And if you don't see something spit out here, then you know that it's not communicating to your JavaScript correctly. Our initial one was with the alert. So the alert was the first one that we knew that it was actually connected. But now we see that this happened and this happened. And if we refresh our page again, we're going to see that alert pop up. Keep your console open. Go ahead and keep your console open this entire time. The console won't close when you refresh your page, which is also nice. But when we refresh the page now with the console open, you'll see that we don't see our message down here. And the reason we don't see our message down here, which may be common sense, is because the JavaScript is being executed and it sees this first line. So the browser says, okay, cool, I'm doing this. I'm doing an alert. I'm going to alert you about this. This pops up. And one of the things that an alert requires is some kind of feedback from the user. So because I haven't hit this OK button yet, I basically haven't allowed this program to continue running onto line 3. Or it's going to skip line 2 because there's nothing there, and it's going to hit line 3, and it's going to say, okay, I got something else to do. So it's not going to do that until I continue on here. And you can tell because of this spinning the loading icon in the browser tab. So we know that this isn't done executing. So when we click OK, boop, immediately, hey, this is a console log statement. Then we get a console log statement coming out. This is something we're going to talk about a lot as time goes on. But basically, you know, you probably assumed this, but JavaScript is going to start from the top down. It's going to start at line 1, and it's going to execute as much as it can as it moves down the page. Okay, cool. So we got our console open. We're seeing stuff happen. Did anybody not get a console.log statement or an alert to pop up in their browser? All right. Now, we're going to write another little piece of code here. And bear with me, the beginning of this. So we're kind of starting out here. We're kind of going to start out just throwing in some interesting things and kind of seeing what happens. And we're not going to talk too much about the exact syntax of everything until we have kind of just thrown a few random things into our app.js file just to see what happens. So don't worry about not going into detail about how these things work, because we are going to. But for starters, we just want to add some stuff in and kind of see how this works. And this is the fun of JavaScript, is really just working with this and writing stuff and seeing what happens. I really want you guys to dig into the experimental part of learning this stuff, because that is how you learn it, is you just try it out. So kind of in the spirit of that execution order, let's write a couple more console.log statements. So console.log, quote, go ahead and throw that semicolon at the end. If you miss the semicolons, it's really not a big deal right now. It's not going to break your code, but it's a good habit to get into, is putting a semicolon at the end of basically the logical end of any code you write in JavaScript. It's kind of like a period. You can think of a semicolon as the end of a sentence, a period on the end of a sentence. So inside of our console log statement here, we're going to write first. And now, if you are on a Mac in VS Code, there's a fun command we'll practice here. So if you hold command and option and shift at the same time, while your cursor is on a line here, you can then hit the down or up arrow, and it will duplicate that line either below or above, depending on down or up, as you hit it. So this is a really fun command. This is really useful too, because you can just duplicate stuff a ton. I'm gonna undo some of those. So go ahead and give that a try. Option Shift and then down arrow when you're on a line, and you can duplicate that. If you're not on a Mac and you're on Linux or something, just go ahead and highlight it and copy it, and then Command D. So let's get a few of those going, and let's rename that word first on the following ones. Let's do second, and don't confuse yourself. Do these in order. Third, fourth, and fifth. All right. No surprises, but I assume that this is going to print out in order here. So let's go ahead and save our file and refresh our page. We're going to see our alert. Cool beans. And now we see some more information. So if you guys see this spit out here, we don't have any surprises. We see first, second, third, fourth, fifth. We see things executing from line 5 to line 9 as expected. One cool thing to look at here is we do see some extra information over here. We see where it came from. So the browser and Chrome DevTools is able to tell us and say, hey, cool, I know specifically this line of code came from app.js, which is our file name that we named, at line 3. So that's pretty sweet. We have a lot of information that we're getting already from the console here. We know line 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Awesome. So the console is telling us that. Since we know our JavaScript is connected to our HTML successfully here, let's go ahead and comment out that first alert statement, because it's going to get a little annoying for that to keep popping up every time we want to see output in our console. So to do that, we're going to hit Command / while our cursor is on the first line, or you can type 2 slashes in front of that line of code. Now, what the 2 slashes do, / and you can make a note of this actually in your code. So // this is the syntax for a code comment. And what that means is that any code that you quote unquote comment out, which is a term you're going to hear a lot, means that the code is not going to be executed by the browser. So when we comment out this alert, it's just not going to happen. It's basically like it's not even there. So when we refresh now, we don't see the alert. If we commented everything out, and that's another thing that's nice about that Command / is that you can highlight multiple lines and do Command / to then comment multiple lines. But if we comment everything out and then refresh, nothing happens. It's basically like an empty file. So comments are really handy for annotating your code. And let's say you write a really complicated piece of logic and you're like, well, I don't know if this is going to be very clear for the next developer that works on this project. You can put a comment in and say, this takes in the number of users and divides them by blah, 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 and then it returns this amount, and it's specifically this type because we have to do it later on like this. So sometimes you can write a really quick sentence in English in a comment in your JavaScript that makes working with your code a lot easier, or maybe even for yourself, for remembering why you wrote that code that you figured out over a couple days. So comments are really handy. And they're definitely handy for preventing code from executing. So that's what we're doing with that alert there. Go ahead and save our file. Now, we are going to talk about quite a bit of things here today. Let's do, sorry, one sec. Just trying to figure out the right order to do this in the notes. So everything we've been doing here so far, when we console logged out this, hey, this is console log statement, first, second, third, fourth. What this is, what these are called when we put quotes around things, this is a string is the name of it. So in quotes, I'm a string. This is a value is what they're called. Well, the value is I'm a string, but this is of a type of string. Go ahead and comment that out so that we're not saying that. So there are multiple types of values that we have in JavaScript that we're going to want to work with. Generally text, if you have input from a user or something like that, that is going to be a string type. And if it is wrapped in quotes, it is a type of string. We're going to talk about a couple other types today. There are quite a few that we're not going to touch on just because we'll get to those later on. But one of the other very commonly used ones is a number, obviously. So the difference between a string and a number is that they are just not wrapped in quotes. So this is type of number, which that's probably not surprising. And And the last one we're going to talk about is something called a Boolean, which we'll talk a little bit more later, but it's a goofy word that just basically means true or false. So true or false is a Boolean. It's kind of like flipping a coin. All right, so these are three types of code, or three types of values that we can have in JavaScript. We're pretty much just going to work with these guys today, but there's a lot more we're going to learn about them in the future. These are part of a subgroup of values called primitives, which basically means like the base, like the most ground level type of values we can work in to kind of manipulate and make changes in our code as we go. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. So types of values we're going to be working with today. And feel free to follow along and add all these comments and add everything you can into your code as you go. So that might be helpful just for going back and kind of using your code as your notes, maybe rather than having notes themselves. That's assuming you guys are keeping notes, which is probably not true. Okay. Cool. Let's just a couple notes on strings though. So a string can be of two different types of quotes. So you'll notice on your keyboard, you have your single quote and your double quotes. So single and double, these are both valid strings. So single and double quotes are valid, but if you try to mix them, if you try to do a single with a double, this is an invalid string. And your IDE, your VS Code IDE is probably going to help you out here and say, yo, that is not actually valid. Unterminated string literal, cool. So don't mix your quotes in the same string. You can throughout a program or throughout a file have different strings that are single or double quotes, but usually it's a good practice just to kind of stick with one and run with it. Cool. Also, you obviously have to close them. If you don't close them, then that is also invalid and it will give you some squigglies telling you what's going on. So just a quick note on strings. Now when we talk about numbers, so obviously I know some of this may seem a little bit boring, but these are just good foundational, just the foundational way that JavaScript works. So when we type a number, first of all, we see it shows up actually as, I'm sorry, I'm gonna put a little header here. It shows up as a different color. And this is kind of cool because this is something that our IDE is giving us here. So our IDE looks at our code and it understands, we're writing JavaScript and it says, okay, cool. Like whenever it sees this quote, it turns it yellow or some color probably. I don't know what the default is. It might be yellow. And it's saying this is a type of string, which is pretty sweet. Maybe even be able to click on that. No, that doesn't tell us anything about that. But the highlighting here makes our code a lot more readable. Another reason we want to use IDEs, VS Code is really helpful about that. And then we see that Booleans and numbers are going to be purple or some other color. So it's actually telling us that that's a different type. That is actually a different type of value that we're handing over to JavaScript here. So when and why would we need to use these two different things? Like I said, text, user input, people's names and stuff is always going to be strings. Let's say we did something like this though. So if we did 3 + 1, what do you think is going to come back from this? If we console logged this, and when I say console logging or console logging stuff or console log this, that basically just means put the code that you want to check inside of the parentheses. And we're going to do that a bunch today. So just get in the habit of writing console.log parentheses, and then put stuff inside of it that you want to be able to see spit out over here into our console. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to comment out lines 4 through 10 here with command /, just because we want to keep our console clear, because this is going to be logging everything out that we have here. So I don't want to get confused with what I'm doing. So I'm going to leave these guys commented out here, but I want them there so that we can go back and reference if we need to. And these guys as well, this isn't really going to do anything, so we're going to comment those out as well. So we just have one thing going on here. I'm going to delete this guy. So if we run this console log 3 + 1, the literal 3 + 1 printed out to the console, that may not be what we had wanted. What's happening here is this is just a string. This is just a type of string here that we're spitting out. And we're using the character 3, the character plus, the character 1 inside of quotes. And because they're both wrapped in quotes, JavaScript reads this and says, I don't care at all what's inside of here. This is just a type of a string. and I'm just going to give it back to you because you asked for me to console log that out. So that's why we just see 3 + 1 here. And you may think like, why isn't that 4? The reason it isn't 4 is because that is a type of string. If we wanted 4, we need to use the type number. So let's do 4 + 1 now without quotes around it. And if we run this, save our file, go ahead and refresh our page. Now we're going to see 5. And we also notice a little bit of parity between the browser and our IDE in the coloring of things. So we actually see that we see a little purple guy here, which is kind of cool. So the strings are coming out as white, but we do see a difference for the type that comes out when it's a number. So that is kind of a little example of why types are important, because they serve different purposes. If you're writing words and letters and things like that, like you're going to need to use a string type for that. And if you're doing any kind of math or addition, subtraction, whatever arithmetic, you're going to use a type of number. So those are 2 of the most important types we are going to be working with for sure. Another thing as well that you guys probably assumed, but let's go ahead and duplicate that line with Option Shift down down, and you can do any math arithmetic operator. So let's do divide, and divide is /, and then multiplication is just a asterisk. It's just star. So you can go ahead and do that. Change the numbers up, by 10, 4 times blah blah blah, ton of numbers. And let's go ahead and save that and refresh. Cool. So now we see some different outputs for 4 + 1, 4 divided by 10, 4 times 198,237, which is cool. And when we talked about earlier about math, about how, a lot of people are bad at math who become great programmers, it's because you don't really need to know math. Because you can do this kind of stuff and it just does it for you. It's like a big calculator. So a lot of the logic problems you're working through, you'll use arithmetic and mathematical operators to solve problems, but mostly it's kind of a big picture thinking. It's not really as much like how good are you at math flashcards and things like that. So those are some of the things you can do. You can do tons and tons and tons of stuff with type of number. Obviously, that's like a building block of JavaScript. Okay, one other thing that we're going to look at really quick here, just to kind of show how the Chrome DevTools are really powerful, is not only is this going to give us output when we do console.logs in our code over here, we can actually go over here and click into your console and click where this little blue caret is, this little blue caret icon, and you'll see your cursor blink in the console. So the cool thing about this is that this is a live JavaScript environment. And what that basically means is that you can write JavaScript in here and the console, the browser, totally understands it and it will give you output. So go ahead and do some like addition over here. Do like 5 + 2, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you hit enter and it will give you back values. So obviously we're just doing math here, but you can write JavaScript in here. Hello from the browser. So this is something that's really, really cool. So whenever you have, and don't worry about that undefined there. That's not an error. That's something we'll go over more in the future as to why that happens. But you'll see your output before you see those little undefines pop out. But console log, and we see a console log stick out, and then we see blah blah blah, some garbage, which is really just where we are in this instance of the console at line 1. So if you have like a problem you're working on, you're like, I can't remember how to do this in JavaScript, and you want to just play around with it and kind of see if you can come up with a solution, console's a great playground, a great sandbox for you to open up and be able to write JavaScript. Any valid JavaScript you can write in here. Generally, the single line things are the easiest to work with, but the console is really powerful, and it is a JavaScript environment that will output our information from our app.js, and it will also allow us to actually write JavaScript directly in it, which is pretty cool. Okay, sweet. So we talked a little bit about Booleans, about how Booleans are true or false. That's basically all they return. And that may not seem super useful, but it really is, because what Booleans allow us to do is one of the things we can use them for is checking whether or not things are true or false by comparing their equality. So let's try this out. Let's do a console.log statement. You guys are going to get real comfortable with writing console.log. That is for sure. And if you like, you can comment these out, our previous console logs, since we're not going to be using this right now. So let's do console log, and let's do 5, and then do equal, 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 3 equal signs, triple equals. We're going to do 5. So what this is going to do is this is saying, does 5, the number, because it is a type of number, go equal 5? And when we say equal in JavaScript, this is something that is also something we have to wrap our brains around, is that equal is 3 equal signs. That is a strict equality operator is what it's called. So when we are comparing the equality of a value, you always use 3 equal signs. That's something that's you're probably gonna make a mistake on. Use a single one, that's okay. That does something different we're gonna talk about shortly here. But the triple equal sign is the strict equality operator. So when we do this, this by default is going to return us a Boolean, because that's exactly what we're asking for. We're asking for whether or not this is true or false. So this is one of the ways Booleans come in really, really handy. And if this was not true, let's say 4, and we run this, we see that's false. So when you see true and false values coming through, these are not strings, even though this is the letter FALSE, the letters FALSE, that is not a string. That is a type. That is a very specific type, and it is a Boolean, whether it is true or false. And we're going to see those a lot as we go on. They're going to be really, really useful for checking things out and returning whether or not things are in a certain state. But that is how Booleans primarily work. Okay. You can also, sorry, I might as well, I think I should mention this as well. So with Booleans, let's do another console.log. And one thing you guys might want to do is just keep a console log at the bottom here for you to copy and paste if you want to. So that way you don't have to type it out every time. Up to you though. So in our console.log, let's see if we can use it on strings. So what if we do 1 and, well, let's not make that too confusing. Let's make that, okay, so thing 1 and triple equals strict equality equals thing 1. So let's see if this is true. Does thing 1 equal thing 1? And we see we got our first false, and then we got true. Comment this out just to be clear. So we see when we do a strict equality operator, we can do it on different types. It doesn't have to just be a number, even though we're commonly thinking about equals and multiplication, division, and those things together. When we talk about the strict equality operator, it's not mathematical. We're not thinking about math. We're just this is checking the value of a type, and the value of the string thing 1 is identical to the value of the string thing 1. So that is going to return us a Boolean true, which is pretty cool. So we can check and say, thing 5 is not going to be true. It's going to give us false. So that's one of the ways we can use Booleans. A practical application of this is if you are trying to log in to Facebook and you put in the wrong username, and you fat finger it and you type the wrong name, the wrong username. At some point along the line, that code is definitely using a Boolean to check and make sure that those values match. And if they don't match, it is going to be returning false. And that false is then given to you as a user saying, errors, please change something, you can't log in. So these are used all over the place. One of the primary foundational building blocks of JavaScript types and the values within the code that we write. Okay, so far we're looking at all this stuff and you're thinking like, okay, so we can, write numbers and like letters, whoop-de-doo. I don't really see how this is JavaScript or how this is, really pertinent or it's going to help us do anything, which at this point, that's definitely true. We've created some values here, right? We've created them and we're printing them out in the console and we can see them and whatnot. We can, we're learning the connection between the browser and our code. So that's cool. But like, what are we going to do with this stuff? Like other than just write it and print it out? That's where the next piece of JavaScript is going to come in that's really going to help us out here. And this is variables. So the concept of a variable is basically the idea that if you have a value, you're definitely going to want to store that. You're going to want to save your values as you're moving through your code here. So let's say we wanted to save Sean's name into a variable. So what we would do here is if we want to say that Sean's name is saved in a variable, let's create something with the keyword let. So if we type let, you should probably see it turn blue, something like that. And we're going to type S. Actually, you know what? Let's give it his name, his full name. So we're going to type let Sean, and then we're going to type a single equal sign, and then we're going to do a string. And in the string, I'm going to say Shani boy. Okay. So let's say if this is for storing nicknames per se. So what this is doing now is, first of all, we notice we see the word let, right? That's new. We see the word Sean, but it's not in quotes, and it's also not a number, and it's definitely not a Boolean. So what is that? That right there, Sean, that word that we wrote, that is a variable. We are creating a variable here, and we say, okay, this isn't a triple equal sign, this is a single equal sign, but I thought we didn't use the single equal sign for equality. That is true, we don't use the single equal sign for equality. We use the single equal sign for assignment. And this is something that is also a little bit of a weird thing to kind of wrap your brain around. Single equal signs mean assignment. I'm gonna do that in all caps. Mean assignment. And what does that mean? That means that we are assigning the value Shawnee boy as a string to the variable Sean. So that is what this whole line does. This line says let which is the keyword for a type of variable. The variable is named Sean, and it is assigned to Shawnee boy as a string, the string of Shawnee boy. So this is what is called a variable declaration. Well, actually, it's a variable assignment as well. So for now, we're going to call it a variable assignment. Go ahead and take it. You can write that note down there. This is called a variable assignment. Now, there's a couple things that are happening here. So, well, actually, I think we'll just stop there. I don't want to go too in the weeds with breaking this down, but this is very, very common. You're going to see this a bajillion times everywhere in code where we are assigning a certain type of value to a variable. And now, if we were to refresh our page, let's just do that. Let's save our work, refresh our page. We don't really see anything happen, right? Like we just see that false still because of our first console.log because we were checking strings with a strict equality operator. But we don't see anything happening because of this. And the reason is because we just created this. We just built a variable, but we didn't actually do anything with it. So let's do something with it. Let's console.log this variable. Now, if we wanted to console.log the variable Sean, we don't want to wrap it in strings. We don't want to make it a number, and it's obviously not a Boolean. So what we're going to do is we're just going to type the word itself. Now, by typing the word itself, without quotes, JavaScript is always going to look for a variable. So when I say this, it's saying console.log Sean. So what's going to come out, probably predictable, is Shawnee boy as a string. So we see that get printed out to the console here. Whenever we are writing a word that is not wrapped in strings, like let's do one called blah. When this happens, let's look at these 3 lines of code here. So what's happening here is JavaScript and the browser is coming through and reading our JavaScript and says, okay, sweet. We have a variable assignment to Sean. So we have a variable Sean that is assigned to the string Shiny boy. Cool. And then it comes down and it remembers this. The browser remembers this. It says, okay, cool. You assigned it to a variable. So that's stored. This is saved. This is safe. It's in a little envelope. And then we move down to line 43 and it says console.log Sean. It says, oh, okay, cool. Like I remember that. I remember who Sean is. I remember that this happened. This is a variable. I can do something with this. And it spits out Shiny boy. Now when we reach line 45 here, it says console.log blah. It says, okay, blah. Where is blah? Because it thinks blah is a variable and it's saying, where can I find this? And it doesn't remember ever being told about blah, which is true because we never did. So when we do this, it's saying variable blah. I don't know, I have no idea what that even is. So it's going to give us an error. if we try to do something like this. It says uncaught reference error, blah is not defined. That is very true and very helpful because we can immediately tell what our problem was. So what if we wanted blah to be defined? We wanted to define it. And you're going to hear different words for, different terminology for the actions we're taking when we write JavaScript. And some of that will be a little frustrating, but it'll come with time. You'll get more comfortable with what error messages are telling you and how you can use those to fix and make changes to your code. So in this case, we know the blah hasn't been defined. So what we could do is let's define it. Let's assign it to a variable. So we're going to say let blah equals a bunch of crap. Cool. Now we probably aren't going to get an error, right? Because we actually have a value. We have something we've assigned to it. We assigned the type of string with a value koega to blah, and we printed it out. Dope. So this is how variables work. You can obviously assign numbers as well, any type you want, any type of value. So let's say num equals 5 or 4. Cool. And then console.log num is going to be, as we expect, 4. So this is the connection of variables and values and how we can kind of use these guys. So the power of this still hasn't quite been revealed to us yet until we get into functions, but we are going to do that shortly here. But this is how variables can be assigned to different values. There is a quick note. Well, I guess it's not a quick note. I guess it's an important piece of how variables work here we want to talk about. But we see this word let. And you may think like, why is it called let when we're talking about variables? But it doesn't, let has nothing to do with variable. So the word variable, or the term variable, was initially added in JavaScript as the term var back in, I don't remember exactly when they started doing this. I think it was probably at the very beginning. But var obviously stood for variable, and you would define variables like this. So you'd say var, old school equals old. So this is the same thing pretty much as saying let. There are some subtle differences here that we don't want to get into right now. But for all intents and purposes, this is the old school way of saying let. And you'll see this in a lot of code. You might see this in code examples online. You'll see var come up. But for now, we want to go with the modern standard, which is using let for variables. And there's another one that we want to do that we're going to be using as well. That is called const. Now, let's create a new variable. The word const also creates a variable. There are only 2 ways to create variables like this with a variable declaration, that is let and const. So we're going to do const. Let's see, we're going to do this in all caps. I won't change. And we're going to make this 42. Let's do a number. You can make it a string. You can make it whatever you like. It doesn't matter. Assign it any kind of value or any type of value. Now, after we've done that, let's go ahead and pull out our handy console log and put a semicolon at the end. Boop. Oh, that's my spell checker. Sorry. Okay, go ahead and save that. Refresh the page. And we are going to see 4 coming from this one, and we're seeing 42 coming from this line, from line 55. Cool. So it looks like this works exactly the same as let, right? So why do we have 2 of these? Why do we have let and why do we have const? Why does it matter? And why is var changed? Like, why do they get rid of var if it makes a lot more sense to call a variable var? So the reason being has to do with something called reassignment. So variable reassignment is when, and this might be clear just from the name of it, but variable reassignment is when you have a number, and let's start with a new one, or sorry, not a number. When you have a variable, we're going to create a new one here. Let's see, let's call it maiden name. Maiden name equals nut. All right, we're going to close that. Sean's maiden name, quote unquote, as it were, is nut. His family used to be nuts, which is great. Okay, so we've assigned a variable here. It is a type of string with the word nut. I'm going to go back here really quick and I'm going to comment out some of these other console logs. This is another fun thing you can do. So if you click your cursor in VSCode and you hold command, you can actually duplicate your cursor over multiple lines, which is pretty dope. So then you can actually take the same action. You know, so if you type something there, you are going to get the same output on all the lines that you put your cursor. So we want to have all our cursors here because we're going to use it to comment out. So we're going to do command / dope, comment it out. So we're just working with a couple console logs here. So let's refresh to make sure that worked, just so we're not getting confused. So we only see our 42 from our first const spitting out. Now we're going to talk about variable reassignment. We have maiden name equals nut. And now, Sean's, what was it? Your grandpa changed the name, or was it your dad? This is important backstory. Is your dad? Okay. So then here we go. In a comment, we're going to do a little pseudo code and say, Sean's dad changed his name to McKnight. Okay, now maiden name is no longer, well, the value is still nut, but we want to change it. We want to say, oh, actually, that variable's out of date because he changed the name. So to reassign a variable, we are just going to say, we're just going to pull it up. We're just going to tell JavaScript to remember it. We're going to say, remember this maiden name, and then we're going to reassign it. We're going to assign it to, oh, that's not right, is it? Like capital K. Okay, McKnight. So we're now taking maiden name and giving it McKnight. Now, you see a huge difference here. The difference is that we're not putting the keyword let in front of this variable. So the reason being is because we are reassigning it a new value, but we don't have to tell JavaScript about it. We don't have to declare it again. When we use let, we are declaring something. So I'm gonna make a quick, let's make a quick note of that. So let is used to declare things. Oh, not things, that's not clear. Let's say variables, sorry. Okay, so let is used to declare variables. So we're actually doing a couple of things here. And I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but let is saying, okay, I declare maiden name and I assign it to a value of a certain type. So when we want to just reassign, we don't have to declare it anymore because JavaScript knows maiden name exists. It says, okay, cool, I already know this exists. I remember you did this. So if you put let in front of here, it's going to say, oh, no, you already did that. Like maiden name already exists. Like you don't need to reassign it. Like you don't need to redeclare it. Sorry. But what we are doing here is we're changing its value. So when we console log here, let's console log maiden name. What do you guys think we're going to get? We're going to get McKnight. The reason is because if we put another console log here, now what do you guys think we're going to get? We get nut on line 59, and we get McKnight on line 65. So the reason is, and this is a good visualization for just thinking about how JavaScript reads through your code line by line. So it hits line 58. Okay, cool. We are declaring the variable maiden name. Dope. All right, now we are assigning it to the string value nut. Semicolon. End of sentence. Cool. And then we console log maiden name. Sweet. I know what maiden name is. It is nut. It spits it out to the console. There you go. Move down to line 63, the next line that gets executed by our code. Now the browser reads that. It says maiden name. Okay, I remember maiden name. Maiden name is nut. Sweet. Oh, I see an equal sign, a single equal, which is the assignment. And it says, okay, now it's assigned to the string value McKnight. And it just goes back and it replaces that in its memory. It's like it totally forgot that nut ever existed. And it is just McKnight now, just like we all forgot until I brought that back into your hearts and minds that Sean used to be a nut. And the computer, when we say console.log main name, the browser gives us McKnight because that is what it remembers at this point because we've reassigned that value. So that is how variable assignment or reassignment kind of works at a very basic level. It's really powerful. It's really cool. But you're probably thinking, why are we talking about this? Where did const go? This is where const comes in. Because let, and one of the quick ways you can think about this is that let allows you to do things with their variables. It allows you to change variables. It lets you change variables. It lets you do these things. Constant, a constant variable, a const, does not allow you. It doesn't let you do anything. And that is why there are two different types of variables. Const does not allow you to do or to change anything about your variables. And it should probably be clear at this point that like that is why they're named let and const, is because they're trying to communicate with you what they do and how they function based off those things. Sorry, I was just rearranging some lines here. So let's go ahead and remember, so on line 54, we declared our const I won't change, and we assigned it to the value of the number 42. Cool. So down here, let's try the same thing we did with made name. Let's try to say I won't change. And if you start typing that, you might be able to just tab complete it, which is kind of cool if it knows the variable is in memory. So let's do the same thing we did here. So we we kind of had made name, and then we said made name equals this. So let's do the same thing with I won't change. So we had const I won't change 42. Let's try to say I won't change is 55, right? So this is pretty much the same thing we're doing here. And just to keep this from being confusing as well, sorry, I'm going to move this down. So, okay, so we're going to do it right here. So it's all together. I won't change 42, console.log I won't change 55. So if we do this, and then we do a console.log console.log, I won't change. Sweet. What are we going to get? So take a quick guesses. Take guesses in your brains what you think is going to happen here. Okay, we see nut, we see McKnight, so those functions as we expected. And then we see the assignment of the variable, and then we see we console log it out. Cool, it's 42 like we told it was, it remembers that. And then it comes down here, and it says I won't change equals 55. And where did our error come from? Our error came from line 70 because the browser tells us right here. So we know it came directly from line 70. We look at this, it says I won't change equals 55, or is assigned to, reassigned to the value 55. Assignment to constant variable is a type error. So type error, that also gives us some clues here, right? Because we're talking about types. And a type error is saying that you are creating a variable that is a constant. And I can't change anything about that variable. I can't change I won't change to 55 because you said it was 42 and you specifically made it a constant. If you wanted this to change, you should have made it a let so that you could let me do that. But I am not allowed to do that because you made it a constant. So this is really handy, and it's really the big difference between the two types of variables. That's pretty much it, that you cannot reassign those things. One thing you'll notice here is that I use all caps when I did this this constant here, this constant declaration. And I'm going to put a note here. You cannot do this. It will throw an error. Let is used to declare variables. Why did I write that? I'm deleting that. That's confusing. Okay. Okay, sorry guys, I'm screwing with your notes here if you guys are following along. I just reorganized things a little bit. You don't need to change anything. Okay, so that's going to throw an error. We did notice that const, when we declared our const, it was all caps, right? And you're like, that's weird. That doesn't really seem like we're kind of doing everything else. The reason we do constants in all caps is because you kind of want to communicate later on down your code that the variable that might be getting worked with or referenced, it's not going to be manipulated because it's a constant, but the variable that's being referenced as we go down through our code, it's a quick and easy way to communicate to developers that this is a constant. Because if we're passing this through functions, or passing it through and using it for different things, like let's say you have, you're working on some kind of audio software and you want to set a constant that's max volume. Like the volume should never go above a certain level, and everybody's decided that the maximum volume should be 95. And that should never, ever change. You would want that to be a constant. So we're going to do that in all caps because, you know, a million places in the application that we reference the maximum volume, you immediately know it's a constant, whether because it's in all caps. You're probably not even looking at the place that it was defined where you were, 100% sure that it was a constant because we see this keyword. But you know it's a constant because we have all agreed that we do consts in all caps. That's just kind of a best practice. Best practice, something everybody's agreed on, that is beneficial to the the code base users and the developers, so they know what's going on. So that's just something you can do. You are able to assign constants to any formatting you want as far as your words or your letters go, or your characters, but this is preferred. Make a quick note of that. Preferred to use all caps. Oh, Martin's got something to say. Everyone agrees on. Yeah, nobody agrees on anything, but you'll see this pretty often, and that's why. Martin, you see this, right? Do you agree that this is kind of a best practice? This is standard for the most part?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's like on principle, like best friend has to give you shit even if you're in front of 15 people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so that's why the max volume is something. That's just the first thing popped in my head. Seemed like a useful example of how you can use a constant that would never want to change. Because then, let's say the product person comes in and they're like, everybody's complaining, we need to max it out, we need the volume to be 100. Then you could just go in and change this here to be 100, and we would see that get spit out, and it would change everywhere in your application. Everywhere you reference max volume, it changes immediately as soon as you change that definition. And the cool thing about const as well is that you don't have to worry about whether or not you changed the the right place. Like maybe there's with let, it gets a little loosey goosey where maybe somebody has another file where they declared some similar variable name and it's like being used and passed around. So constant just gives you security and certainty. And as a general rule, once again, Marta laughed, but as a general rule, you want to start out by creating your variables with constant. So make it a habit to default to using const when creating or when declaring variables, because it's just safer. It just creates a safer environment for your code. Generally, you want to do everything const, and then you might reach a point where you realize you have to reassign something, and then think about it. Like, is that definitely something you need to do? If so, just go back and change the declaration to a let. I think that is a good habit to get into as well, because constants are just safe. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Sorry, I haven't really stopped in a while to ask, but any questions, any clarifications, anything you guys feel like you're missing or wanted to go a little deeper on it or go faster? Nope. Colin left, just this couch. Nice. Oh, there he is. Okay.
All right, what?
Oh, I was just talking shit on you. You're good.
Oh, good.
Don't worry about it.
Great. I was gone.
All right. Okie dokie. Okay, so we're writing some variables, some constants. Very fun. We tried to reassign our constant. That did not work. We looked at the console. Does anybody have any questions about the console? Does that whole concept make sense? I know that console.log, that syntax doesn't really, mean anything yet, but does everybody kind of grasp the concept of how we can use console logs to take values and then see them in the browser? Cool. All righty. Sorry, I'm just catching up on my notes really quick here. We already did a bunch of this stuff. So I have a note on here about a little bit about debugging. So when we use the console.log statement, you might be thinking like, I don't really see why this is valuable, because if we look at all the code we've written here, we say, okay, I assigned a variable and like I console logged it out. It's like, okay, I already knew what that was. I can just read my code and kind of see what my values are. So like, I don't really understand the value of console.log. you will see the value of this as your code gets a little bit more complex. It doesn't have to become that complex to really see the value of it. But we'll use a really quick example here, just to kind of see how console.log is important. So let's create a new variable called rando, and we're gonna just make it a let. So let rando, actually screw it, we'll do const. Like I said, take my own advice. Const rando equals is assigned to equal sign, single equal sign, and we're gonna use something that is built into the browser here really quick. So capital M, so it's a math with a capital M dot random, and then you do open and closed parentheses, math dot random, semicolon. Now we are going to console log rando, and actually, before we do that, let's not console log that rando. When we run this, JavaScript is going to remember what rando is, but we have no idea what it's going to be. First of all, you guys probably don't really know what type of number this is going to spit out. You assume it's a number just by what it's called, but we don't even know what this does, right? So, well, unless you hover over it, returns a pseudo random number between 0 and 1. So if you hover over it, you know what it does. But you're not going to know what number that is at all. There's no way for you to guess just by reading your code. So this is an incredibly contrived example of how console log can be handy, because if we console log that out, we immediately know between line 77 and line 78. As humans, we're able to look at the console and know what the computer knows. And that's really the value of, oh, whoops, sorry, we're still hitting an error on line 69. And this is I'm actually glad we hit this. So you'll notice we never even got to line 78 because we hit this type error. So this is like a breaking error, which basically means that as the browser was going through and parsing through our JavaScript, it hit something that was like unrecoverable. It's like, oh man, like I cannot, it's like, I'm done. I'm done until you fix this problem. So we hit that uncaught type error is something that it will not recover from and continue on through. So it's not going to hit line 78 to console log this out until we fix that. So we're going to comment out that line 69 since that is something we cannot do, since that's going to throw a fatal error. Okay. So now when we refresh, we see over here 0.4431299. There's no way you would have known. It's just impossible to know what this number was going to be without using a console log and checking to see what it was. So this is just creating randomness. But a lot of times in your application, you're not going to be able to, unless your head is a computer, you're not going to be able to actually read through your code and know everything that's happening. So console log allows you to understand what the computer is interpreting and how it sees things. It's kind of like having a little spy, like a little informant in your code that then spits stuff out and tells you things. It gives you information about what the computer is up to. And it's really, really handy. There are other tools for debugging, but this is the one we're going to start with here. And when we talk about debugging, it just means our code is not doing what we expect it to do. And there is a discrepancy between what's happening in our brains and what the computer is understanding. And this allows us to get in the computer's head, see what it's being told, because we're giving it some kind of faulty instruction, and then to fix those problems. So this is a debugging tool, and it is crucial, very, very crucial to use. And we're going to use it a lot as we go on. Okay, so we went over the equal sign. Triple equal is the strict equality operator. And when we talk about operators, we're really that's the same type of operator when we talk about like math operators, where it's just, multiplication, whatever, like it just does something with our code. So don't worry too much about that term operator, but this is for strict equality. And then this is for assignment. Okay, and we've seen examples of that already. Oops. Okay, that's just a good thing to keep a note of. And once again, guys, the curriculum in the Dev Delta space has very, very detailed notes on this whole thing. So if your notes are getting messed up or you missed something, don't worry about it. Just have something in your app.js file here. You can always go back and reference that, the lesson 5 JS intro markdown file, and it has everything. Everything I'm talking about here is written out, even in a little bit more detail. So you're not going to miss anything. Okie doke. Oh, this is funny. I just looked this up today. So when we are talking about the single equal sign and the double equal sign, yeah, we talked about assignment and declaration. We use the syntax of the single equal sign to do the assignment, and that may have felt a little weird because traditionally you use the single equal sign for like a mathematical operator, like the way we've all understood a single equal sign in the past. But in JavaScript, it has a new meaning, which is kind of like in spoken languages, there are things called false friends, which are basically words that they sound exactly the same, but they have different meanings. And I learned that in Danish, the word fart means speed. So in Danish, a speed bump is literally called a fart bump. Like the signs will say fart bump. It's hilarious. It's great. But kind of like single equal means something in math, and it means something totally different in JavaScript. It is like the fart bump, which I love. Okay. Sweet. So we learned about a strict equality operator. We learned that we can use the strict equality operator on different types. It doesn't just have to be a number. We can use strict equality on strings. We can use it on well, functions, as we'll learn. We can use it on really any value. So it's really handy. It's awesome, and it will give us back a Boolean, which is true or false. Okie dokie. Now we're going to talk about something a little different, also fun. We're going to talk about something called concatenation. I have this horrible GIF from Cats in the Markdown file, so I'll share that with you guys. That movie is absolutely nuts. If you guys have seen that, you should. Okay, so concatenation is how we take strings, multiple strings, and we combine them. It's really all it comes down to. Concatenation is combining strings. And what does that look like? That looks like this. So yo plus dog. Okay. Let's just console log that. So we're going to do two strings. We're not going to do any variable assignment or anything. We're just going to directly console log them. We're just going to console log them as values, as the type string, as they are. If we do console.log yo plus dog, this is another thing kind of like the single equal sign, where plus in your brains is, obviously very a math thing. But in JavaScript, it's not always. It's more just a combination. It's like for combining. So plus can just be for combining. If you use it with type number, it is used as addition. But when you're using it with type string, it's just basically a combinator, a combiner. So when we do this right here is the heart and soul of concatenation, combining things. So let's do it. Let's run it and see what we get. Okay, so we get yo dog. So you may notice that there is no space between those two, even though we have a space here and a space here between the plus and the quote. That doesn't really matter. JavaScript doesn't care about these spaces. That's the same thing as this, basically. So when we're concatenating, and this is something that's important to note as well, is that strings, everything inside of a string is going to be like taken into account, basically. So if you're missing a space, that will also show up in your string concatenation. And this is important, and it happens all the time where you kind of miss a space and how you're spacing out words. So if we add a little space after yo now let's see what happens. So now we see we actually do have a space between yo and dog. Cool, nice. So we can use concatenation to combine strings. There is a newer and kind of, I think a better way of doing this that is called a template literal. And I want you guys to look into, and we'll do this more as time goes on, but for now, for the sake of kind of simplicity and using easy to read syntax, we'll do most of the examples like this for concatenation, but I just want you guys to know about this. There's another way you can do it, and it's with a backtick. So instead of quotes, backtick is right above the tab key on the left-hand side, right next to it's the same key as tilde. So if you hit that without shift, you can write your strings. And this is really handy for when you start throwing variables into your strings. So I think this will work. Yeah, it's the same thing. So you can use these guys, but the nice thing is when you're using variables, you can actually put them inside of the strings themselves. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. And when you do that with a $sign and then you do curly braces. And as we'll see, the difference here is that it's going to actually respect spaces inside of these backticks, and then we can put a variable name in here. So let's see, let's do maiden name, right? That'll be fun. So if we put maiden name in here, let's change our text actually. Let's say Sean is a, and then we have maiden name in there. All right, and we're gonna do something similar in this old syntax. We'll do the same thing, but the old school way. Is a, and then this is where the template literals are nice, is because they allow us to kind of do this with less characters, just a little less typing. And it avoids mistakes with the having to put the spaces at the end of lines and stuff. So to do that, you would have to do it like this. Now, first of all, this is kind of cool because this allows us to see how we can use this plus sign to add, well, concatenate things together. Whether or not, depending on what value they are. So this could even be a number. This doesn't have to be a string. This is just a variable right now. But this variable is remembered by our environment. Like the browser remembers what maiden name is. It remembers it here because they had been defined up on line 61, or sorry, it'd been redefined on line 60. So when we run this, we see the exact same output. And it's cool because we see kind of the power of how we can start using variables here. That if, even though we're console logging here twice, maiden name, this is a simple little introduction to how variables can be powerful. So we're doing this twice. Now, if we go up and we take our reassignment and we just change this to something totally different, we only had to change this once in the assignment, or in this case, the reassignment. And since that's the only place we changed it, it's going to change everywhere else that we reference that variable, which is pretty dope. So variables are handy. And template literals are also handy. So I'm going to make a note of that. Old school concatenation. And then this is a template literal. I say at this point, just pick whichever one is easiest for you guys as you're kind of doing this, and just roll with it. You don't need to worry about trying to do both at the same time. So that, that's really pretty much it. String concatenation is pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind you can use variables with it, and it is a way for us to combine strings. And sorry, this example is actually pretty crappy. I'm going to change this first one here. So, because that didn't really make any sense why you would want to break that up, but it allows you to break up a string and put something like in the middle of it. So now we can say Sean McKnight is a butt or was a nut. All right. So now when we refresh this, we see a full sentence. This is Sean McKnight was a nut. Now you can imagine how this could be handy if you had like an input field and you wanted to take the user's input and they type whatever they want in there. And then somehow we grab that, which we're going to talk about next class. And then we can stuff that into a string. We're going to use concatenation to do that kind of stuff. So like whenever you get an email and it says, hey, Jens, thanks for signing up for blah, blah, blah. They're using string concatenation to create an email with your name. So it's really powerful, really common, very, very much a foundational piece of JavaScript as well, using the types string. So we've learned a lot of stuff. We're potentially still at a point right now where you're thinking, like, I still don't really see what I can do with this. Like, it doesn't feel like this is giving me a whole lot. Like, CSS, HTML makes sense. What we can do, we can spell it on the page. We can make beautiful things. But like, what can we do with JavaScript? Like, this doesn't feel like I'm doing a whole lot with it. And that is because we haven't hit the absolute most crucial and important part of JavaScript yet, and that is the function. So the function is how we create reusability in our code. It is how we create truly dynamic applications. And it's basically like a little machine. So you can make as many functions as you want. You use functions with other functions. They collaborate together. And they're basically little machines that have like a hopper on the top, like a thing where you put a bunch of ingredients in, right? And you put ingredients into your little machine, and then your machine takes an action on those things. So like, let's say it assembles an action figure somehow, some machine where you put in a bunch of stray limbs and torsos into the top. And then in the machine, it grabs those ingredients and it pops them together and it takes actions and it pushes levers and it pops springs and it builds something. And then at the end, it craps it out. And you have your output of a perfectly built little action figure, or maybe it packages it up and it like sucks a piece of, you know, plastic bubble over the top of it. That's kind of like a function. A function is something that takes something into it. It does something with what it was given, and then it spits out a value at the end of it. Now, they're super reusable, super powerful, and they can be passed around all over the place. They're really flexible. And let's just get into writing them because they're not really gonna, the value is gonna be lost until we start using them. Let's look at the basic syntax first. Okay, so when we're talking about functions, first of all, I'm gonna make a little note, functions, and I'm gonna move this up. Sorry, I'm just moving my notes around so it makes a little bit more sense. Single equals. We already talked about that somewhere up here. I shouldn't delete that. Okay. All right, we're talking about functions. I'm gonna get rid of this little console.log guy. So this is the basic syntax for a function. Is this. So what we have open parentheses, close parentheses, equal sign, right bracket, curly brace, and then a closing curly brace. So this here is just as valid as this here. So just so you guys know. This whole like putting this curly brace on another line, so moving the curly brace from line 106 to line 108, this is just for readability. When we send JavaScript to the browser, the browser doesn't really care about a lot of this, what we call white space. Like it might as well be given this, and it's the exact same thing to the browser, to whoever's interpreting our JavaScript code. We do this for legibility. We do a lot of things so that we just make sure that we have, you know, something that other people can read. So the enter, you know, hitting enter after your brackets and putting a space between there, and then, you know, code goes here. That is pretty much what you're usually going to want to do, unless you have an incredibly simple function that can just be like a few characters. So these are both functions. Both valid function syntax. Now, these functions don't do anything. They're completely empty and they serve no purpose whatsoever. But I just want you guys to have those in mind so that when we're writing extra things here, you guys can see, you know, where does the beginning of the function syntax end and where does something else start. So that is a function, is parentheses. The arrow is what we call it. These are arrow functions. It's just the name of them in the new JavaScript syntax. And then we have our braces, and that's called a block. Where our code goes is in a code block. And we talked about blocks a little bit with CSS, and even a little bit with HTML. So kind of just a term for like a chunk of where code lives. So we talk about our machine, right? We talk about like where the hopper is, and then we talk about like where the stuff happens, and then we talk about what comes out of it. So let's take our example. Let's broaden that out a little bit so we can actually see that. So considering if a function is like a machine, then this is what they would be. So this right here, this is the hopper. These two parentheses, the first two parentheses is like the hopper on your machine. And it takes in some kind of ingredient. So I'm going to type that in there. And then we see the arrow. The arrow is basically just saying like, you know, this is an absolute crucial part of the function syntax. So when we have parentheses, arrow, curly brace, when we have this syntax here, this is basically just telling JavaScript, like it's telling our browser, oh, okay, this is a function. I am treating this like a function, and I will execute it as a function. And then we hit our curly brace, and then this is where the, you know, the gears, the cogs, the springs, and everything is. This is where all the stuff happens. So this is stuff happening and being manipulated. And then we talk about the end of our machine, when it craps out something. That is used with a statement that is called return. And you should see return change a different color when you type it. And in this case, let's do this. So what we've done here is we have created a function, and now this is a function that could do something. This is a function that takes an ingredient, it goes into the machine, and there's a bunch of comments, and we return the ingredient, which is spits something out. Cool. So this is a valid function that doesn't do anything. It still doesn't do anything. It's like passing something into a machine that doesn't do anything with it except spit it back out and give it back to you. So that is, we've gone into a function and we've returned something out of a function. Cool. We're missing a couple pieces here to make this function usable. It is valid, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. One of the reasons is because we think about variables. Like, remember when we had strings and we were working with just numbers and strings up here at the top, like this and this. When we write this, this is a literal piece of information that has a type of string and a value of single, but it's just not stored anywhere. Like the browser, JavaScript doesn't remember what this is. It doesn't remember where it goes. It just is. It just is there. That's kind of like what we just did with this function down here. It says, okay, this is a type of, this is a function type. You wrote some stuff in here. I'm aware of it, but it just is there. It isn't really remembered by JavaScript. JavaScript has no memory of where this is or why it needs to use it, or if it could even use it again. It's really difficult to reuse functions like this. So what we want to do is we want to do a function declaration. Now, if you guys remember when we talked about variable declarations, we are assigning it to a variable and then declare, we declare it and assign it with the single equal sign to a value. So we want to do that actually with a function so that we can make it reusable. So to make this function reusable, I'm going to take it and I'm going to duplicate it with Option Shift down arrow after it's highlighted. And now what we're going to do is we're going to give it a constant. We're going to actually assign a function to a variable. So we're going to say const my first func equals is assigned to a function. So this is very common. This is the probably the most common. I don't know about most common, but I'll say common syntax for creating functions. Cool. So what we've done here is this is a function declaration. Is a function declaration. Cool. Okay. Because we declared a constant variable and it's called my first function. And then we assigned it to a function. So it's kind of cool. We can kind of see now how variables are really flexible. We can use them to be assigned to many, many things. So in this case, we assigned it to a whole entire function. That's dope. But this function doesn't really do anything. We also aren't using this function for anything yet. So to use this function, we need to invoke it. To use a function, you must invoke it. So to invoke this function, what we're going to do is we need to take the name of it. What is the name of this function? The name of this function is my first func. It is the variable. Now to invoke it, we have to put parentheses on it. And what this is, you'll hear this being called invoking, triggering. There's multiple terms you'll hear for this. You also hear it being called calling a function, calling a function. So this is called many things. But when we do this, this is where some of the real magic happens. This is some of the best parts of JavaScript here. So what we've done at this point is I'm going to comment this guy out really quick. So we're just looking at this. Okay. So we have my first function. I'm going to delete these comments so that we're really clear about what's going on here. Okay. So when we do my first function, invoke, basically nothing is really happening as far as what's being given to the function. So when we talk about ingredient here, so we talk about this here, this is what is called a parameter. And if you hover over it, it'll tell you that. Cool. So we see a parameter there. A parameter is like a placeholder. in the sense that when we define our function declaration, a parameter could be anything. It can be anything. This is like just a placeholder for something that will be. Now, to give it something so that it actually has a value, it has something to work with, we do that with an argument. Now, arguments and parameters are basically like cousins. In here, let's say that this is a string. Let's make it coffee cup, because that's right next to me. Okay, so coffee cup is an argument, and ingredient is a placeholder, or sorry, parameter. And I'll do in quotes placeholder. I like to think about those two together. They both start with a P. They're kind of similar, parameter and placeholder. So your parameter here is like a placeholder. It will be replaced with something else. On line 136, an argument goes in to replace the placeholder. So now you guys can maybe guess what's going to happen here. So when we're calling my first function and we are passing it coffee cup as an argument. So when we go into my first function here, we enter, let's look at the right-hand side of the equal sign. Basically what's going to happen is that the function is going to be invoked here, which means let's use it. So we start it up, we go into it. At this point in time, ingredient is almost like a variable in the sense that once we enter these braces here, anytime you reference it, it's going to give us the argument, the value of the argument. So if we put a console.log here, because return is not a console log. Return is basically just giving a value back out that can be used within the context of JavaScript. So let's do a console.log on ingredient and see what it is. So what do you guys think this is going to print out? I think there's only like 4 of us left. You guys can all unmute.
There's just the nuts and Colin.
What do you guys think it's going to print out?
Ingredients.
Coffee cup.
Okay. Sam thinks it's going to print out coffee cup. Colin knows.
Oh yeah, it's going to print off coffee cup.
Do you see why, Sean?
Yeah, because we defined coffee cup as my first function, and then we put that variable. So my first function equals ingredient. So then we're calling ingredient. It's going to call the first function, which is coffee cup. Right?
Okay. You are correct as the output. I think some of the terminology is a little off. We are
probably.
So we're calling the function. So the calling part is the parentheses. Like this is the important part. But like think of this like a gun. Like my first function is like a gun. It's loaded, it has a bullet in it, and it's been cocked. But nothing has happened. Like nothing has happened here yet. So what this does, this is pulling the trigger. This is pulling the trigger on the gun. This is basically saying like, now do something with it. And now all the actions happen. Everything happens. Nothing happens until we pull the trigger. Now, this first little parentheses kind of looks like a trigger. I like to think about it that way. So you're triggering the gun. You are making everything happen when you invoke it. And that's what we're doing here. So when we trigger this function, now ingredient, at this point in time, we're basically saying, okay, this is our parameter. So when we're in the function, in the curly brace, down on line 129, ingredient has now magically just morphed into being coffee cup as a string, the string coffee cup. Everywhere ingredient happens is the string coffee cup. So let's see. Sweet. So we get a console.log of coffee cup. Very cool. Now, let's do something else. Let's do you guys think we could call or invoke this function multiple times? Like this?
I would assume so.
We can. And this is a critical part of how reusable this is, because how can we change what our output is from a function we wrote on line 128 to 130, or sorry, 131? This code is, we're not going to change this at all. We're going to leave this as is, but we can use it to give us back something totally different just because of what we pass it, right? So we pass this a butthole. What do you guys think will get printed out here?
Thermometer.
What's up?
I said we are so mature.
Oh yeah, I always do this. I do this at work too. Well, not like in production code, but I put it in all my test code. These butthole, lots of buttholes. Sorry, I'm just cleaning out my other console log so it's a little clearer. Okay, so what do we think we'll get? We think we're gonna get something similar. We have a coffee cup and a butthole. That's awesome. So we're able to just call this function and like get something back different, and we're not doing anything with it yet, so we still don't really see the power of this, but we're going through this function and we're doing something with it. Now, what I want you guys to kind of guide me a little bit. How should we, like, we could write any JavaScript we want in these two brackets, right? So let's do something. Let's do something with it. What are like some of the few pieces of JavaScript we've learned so far? And like, how could we throw those into this function? And
Like a let or something, or is that what
sure.
you're
So
talking
what?
about?
Yeah. What is let?
Like what specifically is let?
Yeah. What is it? Right. Well, like what is
It's
it?
a variable. It's like assigning
Cool.
a variable, right?
Totally. Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's do a variable. Sean, just walk me through this. How would you want to use let here inside of this
I
function?
guess I don't really fully understand why. Like, I don't know why this would be why defining something within here would, like a variable in here, would matter.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Let's think about that. Let's think about that. We could create a variable that is the ingredient, right? So we could use the ingredient in our variable. So let's do like let new thing equal ingredient. And at this point, we're using ingredient like a variable, but it is a parameter inside of the function. So parameters can be used like variables, which is really cool. So how about concatenation? Can we throw concatenation in here too, you think?
Probably.
Yeah. Could you do like ingredient plus like a string saying like that ingredient ordered or something like that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. And we'll do like dash on there. Cool. So now when we do this, we have a variable, right? We removed our console log. What do we need to console log if we want to see something, see that output?
New thing?
Yep.
Could you
by
just
console logging
new thing, or would that not work?
What's up?
Could you just return the variable new thing after that, or would that not work?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it totally would. I was actually just going to get to that next, that this still doesn't do anything because we're just console logging it rather than returning it. Absolutely. So we can do this. Now, okay, really quick though, before we do that, let's run it. So awesome. Coffee cup, that ingredient ordered. Butthole, that ingredient ordered. So do we see a little tiny problem with our concatenation here, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to throw a little space in front of that dash. There we go. Cool. Coffee cup, that ingredient ordered. Butthole, that ingredient ordered. So we're starting to see a little insight into like reusability in functions. You can do anything in here. We can do math. We can do, multiplication. And that that's actually a more common first example is math with a function. And then we'll do that just a sec here. But Sam, you're totally right. We aren't returning anything of value out of this. We're just console logging it. So let's return new thing. Now, if we
why would we
remove
return ingredient? Why are we returning new thing instead?
So if we return ingredient, we just get back the string we passed the function, right?
Okay.
So like in this case, we passed the butthole. So if we just return ingredient, we're only going to get butthole back, even though we took we made some changes here by assigning this variable to the ingredient concatenated with this string. If we just returned ingredient still, we're basically leaving this behind. Does that make sense? So by returning this, we're saying, give me the stuff that I did. Give me the things that the changes I actually made. So then we're returning the variable new thing that we took action on instead of returning ingredient. You could return ingredient, Totally. But it's just, you'd just be kind of losing the work that you did. So now we want to see what we did. You can actually just use a console.log for the whole function. So what this will do is this will console log of value. Console log logs values. That's what it takes. It takes a value and it gives it back to you in the console, right? So if we put a whole function in there, what does that function boil down to? That function does boil down to a value. It boils down to just a string. It boils down to the string butthole that ingredient ordered. So because we return is basically like the statement that says, this is the absolute core of what this function is this thing that I'm calling right after return. So because we said return new thing, we're basically saying that's what this function is going to do. It just spits this back out. So we could just say console log that whole function. It's only going to give us what is returned, if that makes sense.
I'm very confused.
Sorry, I know. Yeah, some of that is a little. I think it's. Is it simpler if we leave the console log in the function, Sean? Does this make more sense?
Kind of. I still am a little bit lost on, but we can get into this after too, where I'm confused at.
Oh yeah, no. We got to do a bunch of these to really make this clear. So let's go again. Let's do another function.
Hey
We're gonna
guys,
do
I
math.
actually need to duck out.
Okay.
But
Sorry, Sam. Yeah, this was a long one. Sorry, we started late.
This is great as usual, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. So thanks, Michael.
Dude, so happy to have you, man. Yeah, definitely. I'll Slack everybody and let everybody know where the homework is if they're interested in doing it. So, and this is pretty much it. We're gonna have a short homework this time. So.
Okay. Cool.
And then for the homework, I said your app.js file should be packed full of new JavaScript now. Let's take a couple more steps to solidify some of this knowledge. So go through the code we've written so far and add comments to it explaining what each line does. Try to use as much terminology we went over in the lesson as possible. Create a new function yourself that does something different than the existing one. Do some Googling to manipulate information somehow and document it using code comments. Once you have an awesome working JS file, go ahead and branch and submit a pull request to the JavaScript-first-steps repo so we can see each other's work. Once your PR is in, try to check back later in the week to comment on your classmates' PRs. There's a lot we'll be learning from each other as we progress. So all the 3 people that are submitting pull requests.